up? Julio, Ricardo, Varela, Latino Rebels Radio Live, Tuesday, June 16th, 2020. I actually got the date right. Jesus, I've lost all track of time. The only reason I know it's June 16th because last week was my birthday, and then June 19th is Friday. It's turning into a global holiday, which I think is fantastic. But listen, welcome back. It's another week, and we're all getting all together. But listen, I am so excited to bring a return guest because she was on the podcast earlier this year, and now she is a Latino Rebels Live guest, and here she is, Myriam Gurba. How are you?
I'm tired and hungry, and I'm here.
That's like life right there. I'm with you. You know, it's so funny you say that because I don't know about you. I mean, you know, I've struggled with mental health in the past, and I've learned to like cope, you know, so I'm always like really fucking proud when I'm like, oh, I'm coping, right? And then I think the last couple of weeks, it's like it seeps in you, right? And especially with all that's going on, and you do get tired, you do get exhausted, but you got to keep at it. And one of the things that helps me is I get to talk to people like you to kind of reconnect. And how are you doing? How are you feeling besides being tired, exhausted, and the last couple of weeks? What's been going through your soul and your brain and your heart?
Everything. You know what I mean? Like emotionally, the last couple of weeks have been everything. It's been like spectacular to see the mobilization that's been happening internationally, and to see the scope of the mobilization. To see the passion that Gen Z is bringing to the streets, and that Black and Brown people are bringing to the streets, and so many folks are sticking their necks out to demonstrate and to be together marching. And so many people are also sticking their necks out, just spilling the tea. Do you know what I mean? Telling the truth about what they're experiencing in their respective industries. So it's amazing to watch so many industries, especially media, have to grapple with a reckoning under these circumstances.
Yeah.
With pandemic as a backdrop, you know?
Yeah, exactly. With a virus. But before I was remiss. I apologize because one of the first questions I asked my guests, but because I've had you on in the past, how best would you describe yourself and what you do as an author? Because I always want to ask my guests. I never like to introduce guests. I want guests to introduce themselves. So I forgot to do that.
I like that. I appreciate that. It's a pet peeve of mine when I notice a person who is hosting a writer, right, and the host reads the writer's bio straight off of the jacket. It's so incredibly rude. So thank you. I appreciate it.
I hate it. I hate the same way. So that's why. So before we talk about what we want to talk about, please share your words, your voice, who you are.
Yeah. So I'm a queer Chicana writer from California. I live in California. I was born here, raised here, first generation. And I write. People will often ask what I write, and I dabble in a little bit of everything.
Right.
I primarily write things that might be considered memoiristic. I tend to write nonfiction. I have been writing a lot of criticism lately, cultural criticism. I'm also a visual artist, and I collaborate in the production of photographs with my partner, Jeff Cordner. And I'm also a high school teacher, although I'm not in the classroom right now.
I know. And so there you go. I appreciate it. And before we continue, I have to say hi to my mother. Hi, Barbara. My mom always watches me, Myriam. Like, this is part of, since the pandemic, she's like, I've seen more of you than ever. So I'm always like, and so it's always good. So listen, I wanted to have you on because you were actually one of my first guests on the podcast earlier this year to talk about American Dirt and Dignidad Literaria and how it just felt like back in the time, pre-pandemic, like it was a thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think of you as a bookend of 2020 for me. So you were that first bookend that kind of lit the spark for me. And I wanted to just see how, you mentioned the industry, you mentioned representation. What does Dignidad Literaria mean to you now? Because it feels to me like it's no longer, it's always been bigger than what it was, but
Yeah.
do you see more of you just said it. It's like, I think people are kind of facing their shit, their problems. And now all of a sudden, you know what I mean? Like all of a sudden, like are
So,
people, what's going, yeah, just explain to me about
so
that.
when that controversy, when that racialized controversy and xenophobic controversy struck, like when I responded to it through cultural criticism, right? I wrote an essay because I was limited in how I could respond, and that I thought was the extent to which I could react. So I reacted in like this really polemical way. Of course, I had no expectation that like what I was doing would become part of a social movement, right?
Right.
That wasn't like manufactured or engineered. That happened because that criticism struck a chord for folks.
Right.
And then as that snowballed, and that quickly sort of got away from me, people made what they wanted to of it. And I think that that's how social movements ought to work. I think they ought to be decentralized. And I think folks ought to make what they can of a movement for their particular community and serve like their local needs. As that was happening, I was enthused by the passion that I saw,
Right.
and sort of the aliveness that I saw, and the hunger. Like there was just this incredible hunger, and it was hunger for justice, And so as that was gaining momentum, and I looked to the horizon, the moment that we are in now could be seen if a person was paying enough attention to marginalized folks. One could see that we were moving in this direction. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no, I that's why I wanted to have you on. You're exactly like confirming my instincts of what I've seen you do, but also I never said, I was one of the first people to say, this isn't about American Dirt, guys.
It wasn't.
And stop. Yeah. So continue. Yeah.
And the other thing that I noticed too was that while the American Dirt controversy and Dignidad had adult participants, right? I noticed that what was happening was also inspiring teenagers and Generation Z, and BLM was inspiring teens and Generation Z, and I could see sort of like the zeal that teens were being moved by, and I started to think of like what was happening in terms of bricks, that we were each putting sort of a brick down in terms of social movement, and each of us has contributed like one of these bricks that's brought us to these mass uprisings. But BLM has done such an incredible amount of work, like the intellectual labor that has been done by queer Black women is spectacular.
It's spectacular, and I think people need to. I think we're beyond. It's almost transformative. This whole notion of what it was and how it was slinged, right? How it started when Trayvon was killed, and also just how it's been discredited. It's like with anything. It's like, let's tear it down. Like now, I see people in my white suburban town in Massachusetts, like asking like, oh, I need a sign, and I think like there's this struggle between like, is this authentic or is this appropriation? But do you feel like there's, at least where you are at, where I know that you are someone who doesn't give an F and have always been unfiltered, which is what I love about you, that, and that goes with, that goes with territory, right? That goes with consequences too. Do you feel like people are waking up to that, or you feel like you still kind of have to like be like, yo, people, this is what you need to focus on? Like, how is it different for you the last couple of weeks in that sense?
Well, what I've noticed is this, that it's not so much that there are folks who were deeply, deeply unaware of injustices who have suddenly had their eyes open. What I have noticed is that there have been a lot of folks sitting in quiet frustration, right? And a lot of folks exercising an incredible amount of restraint who now have a sense of permission to express that, right? And to politicize that frustration, because so frequently we're told not to politicize emotion. But what is anger if not the most political emotion? Because it's also moral. So that's what I've seen more so. For example, the second BLM protest that I attended was here in Long Beach. I live in Long Beach, California.
Yeah.
And it was an incredibly large protest. It was massive.
Yeah.
And we filled the streets and we marched in neighborhoods that were white neighborhoods. And there were white folks in the crowd, but it was largely people of color who were there. It was a lot of young folks. And I was really surveying and scrutinizing the crowd.
Yeah.
And I was looking for adults in my age group, 'cause I'm 43, right? So I was looking for folks in my age group. And what are you laughing?
No, you're Gen X. I mean, I'm 51, and I never ask guests their name, unless you reveal your age. So I'm proud of you. It's like, we're like Gen X, right? What are you, like late, early Gen X? Are you kind of like Gen X millennial?
So I'm Gen X, I think. I'm like,
all
right on
so,
the left.
Yeah. So this is why I think we're hitting it off a little bit, because, we are sort of that
Yeah.
of that frustrated generation that, grew up with LA riots and, Rage Against the Machine and has sort of seen this before. So you're looking for people like you, and you're like, you're saying there's
me in that crowd, and I'm not seeing them. And the thing that I found really frustrating, but again, unsurprising, was that I was looking for teachers. I was looking for teachers in that crowd, and I didn't see a single teacher. And I've taught at several schools in Long Beach. I've taught at 4 different schools, and I didn't see any faculty from anywhere that I've worked, which is incredibly frustrating, because if we're going to revolutionize this country, we need to do so systemically, and folks involved in education, in particular public education, need to be on board, or it's not going to happen. And I'm also incredibly frustrated with the rhetoric that the youth will save us. No, they fucking won't. They need help. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And do we really want child martyrs in our country? No. You know what I mean? It's our collective responsibility to do this. Those of us who can. Some of us can't function in certain capacities, but everybody can find their place in the revolution and in the uprising that has happened. So I was looking for people in my age group, and I was looking for fellow teachers. I didn't see them, but I was heartened by how many students I saw. Like,
there was a thirst that you think it was like the sense of a thirst for, this is, I feel like I'm searching and I'm young, but I get it. I understand. Is that what you're like?
There was a sense of frustration.
Yeah.
There was a sense of, there was a sense that there is a regime that must end. And we are here to tell that regime that its time is up. That was the sense that I got. So, and at that Long Beach march, the other thing that like pervaded that march was a sense of grief. So we were all there comforting one another, and we were marching because we were provoked to do so by Black deaths. right?
Mm-hmm.
We were provoked to do so by the lynchings that have been televised and whose videos have gone viral, but we were also there because of coronavirus and the disproportionate impact that it has had on Black and Brown communities. So there was a sense of there was a sense of sort of being present at a funeral where you're reminiscing, you're comforting.
I know what you're saying. Yeah,
an incredible amount of solemnity. You know what I mean? I've attended other protests, though. For example, there have been several protests that have happened at Hollywood and Vine by the Capitol Records building. Okay. Those are of an entirely different nature. Those have felt like a street party, right? Nice. And a street party that is explicitly a celebration of Black life, in particular, young Black life. And so it's interesting how these protests take on a different character depending on where they are and who's launching them. You know what I mean? They take on their own aesthetic according to who's there and who's planning.
Right. And you're there, right? And so when you see, you know, I feel like if people actually took all the energy that's happened in the world in the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's nowhere near what we're seeing, like what we were told, right? That what was happening, but still with state violence and, you know, repression, and also just the what you're talking about, because it's interesting. I know, you know, when people say defund police, you as an educator, and you know, I used to work, like I told you, I used to work in education, and my you know, and we're, you know, public education is something I believe in. Our kids go to public schools, but this notion of how education has been deprioritized for, I don't even want to begin to think how many decades, Myriam, because, you know, we were probably all having this conversation as teenagers or as 20-somethings back in the day in the 80s and the 90s. And at some point, something has to give, right? It like, you just can't keep removing from education and expect that people are just going to be like, oh, yeah, no, police state, this is great. Yeah, let's. So all this questioning, right? All this, you know, teachers, like, it's like schools as non-political spaces. That's what they have become in a lot of ways. How do we begin to turn that around, I guess? Because I feel like philosophically, right?
That a school is a politically neutral place and that a classroom is a politically neutral place is a sham. And consider those people who tell us that it is impolite to discuss money and that it's impolite to discuss how one voted, right? Why don't people want to share those things? Because they have something to hide, right? It's the wealthy who tell us that it's impolite to talk about money. And and it's a certain segment of the electorate that doesn't want to confess to how they voted. And the crazy thing is, when I was mentored by master teachers and told as a student teacher who would be teaching civics not to ever discuss race and not to ever share my political affiliations with my students, I wanted to laugh at the master teachers because I thought all the kids have to do is take one look at you and your shoes and they know how you vote. Your shoes give it away. Like, who do you think you are that you're walking around neutral? I mean, to me, that is as ridiculous as racial colorblindness. Like, we belong to communities. You know what I mean? And there's there's that Mexican saying, show me who your friends are and you show me yourself. You know what I mean? If I know who your community is, I know who you are. You don't have to explain yourself to me. I don't have to get to know you as an individual. That's an American thing. You know what I mean? Like, no, you're not individual.
If I know who you hang with, I know who you are. Right. Exactly.
So So this notion that schools are politically neutral places is ridiculous. But the other eccentricity about the American school system is that it doesn't exist. Like, schools are decentralized in the United States. We don't have. I mean, the Department of Education.
I don't know what it does.
The Department of Education has minimal relevance to what happens in the classroom. Everybody just kind of gets the memo from the Department of Education and throws it out the window because really it's local school boards that control education. And so if one wants to transform education, they have to transform it at a local level. Then if you look at the way that schools are staffed, again, who is teaching American kids, or not even necessarily American kids, because you have kids that are from undocumented, who are undocumented attending American schools. So 80% of teachers are white.
Right.
They're white. It's a white profession. And often teachers don't live in the community where they teach. Right. So yes, an overhaul needs to happen. And I think a radical transformation needs to happen. I think that there needs to be a revolution, or I would love for there to be a revolution, but it can't be spurred at the federal level. It's not going to happen in that way because that's not the way our government is structured.
Right. And I think what you're saying with the school boards, that's one of the things that I think people miss out is you know, that's political in itself, because most school boards are elected. Very few are appointed. I mean, some are appointed, like larger cities, but most of them, at least, you elect school board members. So that alone becomes political. And I don't think, you know, but I also think it's because this notion of getting power has always been sort of put aside to communities of color. It's like, no, don't rock the boat. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, you don't need to know that local school boards actually can make change on schools. Or if you run for, like, you know, local alderman or city councilor, you might be able to look at priorities between policing, education, and mental. No. Like, don't know. And so that's the part where I think that I'm intrigued by, because you see that energy. And what does transformation really mean? I also am, you know, Black lives lead, Black lives, you know, Black voices lead, Black women voices have led. We need to continue to listen. So where does you know, I'm sure you've seen tension already. I'm just curious, you know, you don't give a shit, which I love. You reach a certain point in your life. That's why I think you're great, Myriam, because I didn't know you were a Gen Xer. And then all of a sudden I'm like, it explains a lot, because you do reach a point where you're like, I seriously give 0 Fs anymore. Like, this is where I'm at. And so how do you deal, you know, like, how do you push through it?
How do I push through?
Just the obstacles, because it's like, oh, no, the police state. No, we need police, or defund, or like you know, not looking at the systemic reasons.
The reason that I'm so outspoken and that I appear to be so liberated is because I actually had to liberate myself. Like, I've experienced a lot of trauma. What queer woman who's the daughter of immigrants hasn't, right? And I think that one response that some women have to extreme trauma, especially like the violent kinds of trauma that I've experienced, is that you kind of lose your fear. I mean, when somebody has tried to kill you, you face death. You know what I mean? Once a man has lifted you by the head and choked you, I mean, it's like all bets are off. You know what people are capable of, and you're like, bring it. So, so like, I was forced into fearlessness, by patriarchy. And there's a feminist, an intersectional feminist, Mona Eltahawy, who I admire very much.
Oh, she was on In the Thick. She's one of my favorites.
Yeah,
she's one of my favorite shows. I love Mona. Yeah, continue. Yeah.
She was traumatized into feminism. She was traumatized into activism because she was sexually assaulted in Mecca. You know, and I had a similar experience where I left a lesbian marriage of 15 years. I dated, I had my first straight cisgendered boyfriend after that. I didn't know what it meant to date a man. I didn't know what was normal or abnormal. And he turned out to be a batterer, you know? And so that experience transformed me. It changed me quite a bit. But what that experience also did was it served as a grotesque lesson in how the police work.
Right.
Because I reported this man to the police.
Yeah.
Nothing happened. I was the one who was punished. He wasn't. He's still walking free. So that experience up close and personal with the police, especially with detectives, in part radicalized me.
So, and here you are. And what do you look to in the future with all this, as Myriam, as you see what has been transpiring?
So I want to see abolition happen. I want to see the police abolished. I want to see policing abolished in the United States. I want to see prisons abolished in the United States. I mean, I want to see those things globally as well. And I want for all oppressed people to be liberated. My liberation is your liberation. Your liberation is my liberation. And our liberation is intimately tied to the most oppressed among us. And so when we consider liberation, we need to think about who is at the intersection of the most oppressions, and then lift up that person, because in lifting up that person, we're lifting up all of us. Do you know what I mean? That's what I want to continue seeing. I'm also going to continue writing.
Yeah, I was curious, like, that was my last question to you. Like, go ahead. From a creative standpoint now, because I'm also, I feel like during this time, everyone's like, oh, I have so much time to write or whatever. And are you writing? Are you struggling? Or what are you looking at in terms of the things that you're writing about?
So I have had some block, like some writer's block on Sundays, but I recall seeing a tweet, and I can't remember who tweeted it, but it was so perfect. And I thank this person very much. They tweeted that a pandemic is not a writer's retreat, because we were being put under so much pressure. Like, we were putting one another under so much pressure to produce. And it's like, no, there are people dying everywhere. We're going through a mass death incident.
Yeah.
We shouldn't hold ourselves to the same standards that we would if we were going to bread loaf. Do you know what I mean? That's not what we're doing.
It's not the same thing. Yeah.
It's not the same thing. So, when I am struck by the ability to write, and often writing comes to me in sort of like this feverish inspiration, I sit down and do it. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm very sort of hypergraphic. If it comes to me in that way, then I give it, but I don't force it. I can't force it.
Oh man, it just, thank you for saying that, because I think there's a lot of writers, and you have been paid for your words. You're you're like, you have representation, and it's not this, it's like, do it when it comes, right? If you ever think writing is so friggin' hard, but it shouldn't be. I mean, I feel pain when I'm released by it, so I use it to like release my pain, but you have to have those moments, right? It has to feel natural, has to be real. Listen, Myriam, I just want to thank you again. You are just one of the kindest, badass souls out there, and I'm just so excited that you said yes. I know there's a lot of tragedy, and there's a lot of, anguish and loss, but there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of transformation. And, you are one of those voices that people should be paying attention to you and listening to you. So I really, really want to thank you for being on and taking the time. And, we're fans, and we're going to keep following your work. So thank you again, Myriam. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
Bye. So, guys, that was the fabulous Myriam Gurba. We started this week with an all-star, and I just want to thank everyone. We're seeing the familiar faces out there. That's right, it's week 3. I have a professional mic. We have a director. You saw some of the clips. We will have a couple of shows again this week, and then we're going to do it one more time. If you like this, just share it, tell people, tweet at it, just do anything. Say, hey, I'm watching this. All our videos are going to be on. This is really great. Myriam's like what she was talking about. There's so many like moments. I learned a lot. I hope you guys did too. And a big thanks to Andrew Vasquez, our director. And Melina's going to be on tomorrow night. And I'll be on. I'll introduce her. But again, thanks for everything, guys. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Latino Rebels Radio Live. Julio, Ricardo, Varela. Stay safe, guys. Peace.